Well, thank you again to our youth praise team and the band and Patrick. What's kind of neat is I look over the congregation, I see that in this new location, you are kind of almost forced to sit wherever you can find a seat. And you're no longer sitting in the same place as you always did. And that's kind of cool. It's a little bit more, it's more difficult for me, however, because now I don't have such a good handle on who's here and who isn't, because you keep switching seats on me. But that's okay. We'll get used to that. I have good news for you today. The good news today is about the new covenant. And we're in the last part of a series on new things, and today we're looking at a new covenant. What is a covenant? We don't usually use that word in everyday language, but what exactly is a covenant? Covenant is a lot of different things. It means different things to different people. For one thing, a covenant is like a treaty. In many ways, a treaty between nations or tribes. A covenant is an agreement. If you do this, I'll do that. And you know, we all have agreements, right? I mean, you have an agreement even with your employer. I'll work 40 hours and you pay me the little miserly amount that you do, something like that. We all make promises. You know, I promise that I'm going to do this, and I expect these results. Or a contract. If the bank is going to loan you the money, you have promised to pay it back. Or you make a pledge. I'm going to do this, you're going to do that, or I'll get this benefit. Or vows. You get married. I love you through sickness and health, for better or worse, and I also expect you to do the same. So we have these kinds of covenants. A covenant is just an agreement. It's a promise. It's a contract. It's a treaty. It's all of those kinds of things. And from time to time in religious circles, you hear things about a new covenant. Of course, that means there's been an old covenant. And in the Bible, what is it talking about when it talks about a new covenant? As we're looking at new things today, we want everyone to perfectly understand what the new covenant is. You know, when it comes to making covenants, General MacArthur in World War II made a covenant in the Philippines. He said, I will return. And did he? Yes, he did. He kept his word. He came back. And that certainly was good news. He said that he would come back, and he did. That is a covenant. I had, in my professional life, I had a covenant that was made, and unfortunately, it was broken. I was pastoring a church, and what you see on the screen right now is this beautiful stained glass window from a church that I used to pastor. And there was an individual who was coming to church, and this individual was very talented, had a wonderful melodious voice, and was near professional quality, and it was just great. And in an adjoining city, just about 10 miles away, there was another church, and this other church was having evangelistic meetings, and they were having this big rally, and they wanted to baptize this guy who was visiting my church on a pretty regular basis, and he was singing and doing all sorts of wonderful things, and he was up front a little bit, and well, they wanted to baptize him and feature him as a singer in these evangelistic meetings. And what I came to find out after a period of time is that this guy had actually been in prison, and his girlfriend came to me privately, and she said, I don't know who else to tell, I haven't told the police, but I've been date raped by this guy. And so now I had this confidential information, and my friend who is a pastor in another church, he wants to feature this guy with the music, and he wants to baptize this guy and, make kind of a big deal about it. And I went to him privately and I said, if I were you, I wouldn't baptize this guy. I'm not going to give you all the details, but I wouldn't baptize him and I wouldn't have him up front. We've stopped doing that at our church. And the pastor said, well, why? And I said, well, I'm not really at liberty to tell you. And he said, well, come on, you got to tell me. If you're asking me to do this, you got to tell me why, because if I don't know why, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I said, well, I'll do it. You're a professional, you're a colleague. I will do it on a professional basis, just like doctors talk to doctors and whatnot. But you've got to promise me that you'll not tell another soul. And he said, I promise. And so I took him at his word, and I confided in him what I had been told, that this man had a checkered past, and someone had accused him of date rape, even though it wasn't reported to the authorities. And that was a big mistake on my part, because that pastor immediately went back to his church and he told his deacons, this guy is a former criminal, and he's been accused of rape. You've got to watch him wherever he goes. And when he made that announcement to all of the deacons, there's like 8 of them. 8 people aren't going to keep a secret. You just pretty much know the law of averages are not going to work in your favor. So he told everybody, and before long, within a week, everybody in the church knew. And then this guy that had been the singer, and he had been the guy that was going to be baptized, and they decided not to baptize him and not to feature him as a singer. He came over to my church, and during a service started yelling the worst 4-letter word obscenities that you could imagine, and causing a major upheaval. I'd never had anything like that before. I didn't know exactly what to do, but we sort of ushered him out of the building, almost physically, and locked the doors and called the police. It was a major disruption, but I learned a really good lesson from that, and I've never trusted another colleague since then with any information, because I figured, fool me once, it's your fault. Fool me twice, it's my fault. Well, I'm just imagining that all of you have had similar experiences to me. You've had broken promises. Someone made a covenant with you. Maybe it was even a marriage contract. Maybe it was you loaned somebody some money. Maybe it was a family member. You never got it paid back. I'm thinking that I'm not the only one who's kind of been burnt on this, that we all, in a way, are alike, because we've all had broken promises. We've all experienced hurt from those kinds of things. To some extent, we are all alike. In fact, we even look alike. As Homo sapiens, if we're born healthy, we have 2 arms and 2 legs and 10 toes and 10 fingers and 2 eyes, and usually just 1 head. Sometimes, through quirk of nature, there are exceptions to that sort of thing.